And with us now in studio is survivor Avraham Roet. Avraham, sir, thank you so much for being with us today. I wanted to ask, before we get to your personal story of survival and the family members that were killed, that you lost in the Holocaust, I want to note you're in your 90s. Most survivors now are in their late 80s or 90s. As the living memory of the Holocaust begins to fade, and children now won't get the chance to speak with survivors like yourself, are you worried that the memory of the Holocaust will be lost or forgotten or trivialized?
We have a problem in the moment with the remembrance of the Shoah, because there are too many connections to genocide. There is nothing in the world history that one government decided to destroy completely another people. And so if the Germans decided to destroy the Jewish people, but not only the people, also their cultural life, there is no anything which is similar to this side. And I believe that the world will remember this always, certainly the Jewish state, but also in the world itself.
Are you, the fact that now everything gets compared to Nazism and Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, even for people who know nothing about it, do you think that's a tragedy? Is it terrible that people talk about it so casually? Or in some ways, at least it keeps the Holocaust alive around the world?
I think my experiences with the third generation, the first generation, they went through the war and they were active or passive, but they went through the war, they were a part of it. The second generation still felt very to their parents, you know, they didn't know exactly what the parents did or not did and what happened. The third generation, I feel much more understandable what happened in the Shoah. They are much more social-minded, they are much more educated, they know more about the Shoah, and this it makes me, I would say, a little more optimistic than the general opinion. The Shoah will not be forgotten.
How did you survive the Shoah?
I survived, but two of my sisters were killed in the war. My family were very Orthodox during the strictly Orthodox, which is called Dutch Orthodox. So, and they were also very liberal. My two sisters and my grandfather, they were got by the Germans, taken out of their living house at that moment, because my sisters didn't want to hide. They were, as religious girls, they didn't want to go to any foreign, to any strange home, and maybe not to eat kosher. So they were got by the Germans and were killed in Auschwitz. My parents and my three brothers and myself were able to hide via the Dutch underground, which was very small. Actually, it were only a few Christians, which now are the Christians for Israel, and a few students who took care or tried to hidden Jews. But at any moment, we should not forget that about 21,000 Jews tried to go into hiding and were hidden in the first stage, but 11,000 of them were caught by the Germans. They were the people who hid them. Either they didn't pay them enough and they put them on the streets, or children, they were afraid to get caught. So that 11,000, more than half of the Dutch Jews who were hidden were caught by the Germans and murdered.
Avraham, you talked about your sisters who were killed. What were their names? How old were they? And do you still think about them even now to this day?
A lot. It's still very emotional for me. My elder sister was killed in almost half a year after she arrived in Auschwitz. My younger sister, which is called Adela, she lived when the Russians freed the Auschwitz. And actually, she was in Birkenau, and from Birkenau they took her to a hospital in Auschwitz, but 2 months later she died from typhus, and she is buried there near Auschwitz in a mass grave in Auschwitz. On the last moment, she wrote us a card, and a card which got to us by Red Cross, in which she mentioned that she lived because she all the time believed in my parents' Friday evening and in the family atmosphere. That is one thing. And the second thing, she wrote the exact dates where my grandfather was gassed and my uncle and her elder sister died and an aunt of us. And she wrote these dates and she asked us to say always Kaddish on these dates.
Even now,
yes,
more than 75 years later, it still brings you
much emotion, yes, because, you know, it's something which should not have been happening. If you live in a democratic country, in a free country, in a Dutch country, and suddenly and you are free and everything, and suddenly your sisters are taken away and murdered in the way they were murdered, it's something you will never forget.
Do you feel it is your duty to share your sister's stories and to share your testimony about the Holocaust? As painful as it is, do you feel it's something you have to do?
I think more, yeah, I do this, but I think more that I'm still fighting for the rights of the Holocaust survivors in every way, both in Holland and here in Israel, because as long as I live and I'm in good health, I still think we should do everything to get the Holocaust survivors' rights. And to my great regret, neither in Holland nor in Israel, this has been taken care of the way it should be.
You lost so much because of the hate and the anti-Semitism and the horrors of the Nazi Third Reich. There are now a growing number of young people around the world who don't believe it. They don't believe it happened. They believe it's exaggerated. What do you think of this, that this exists now in this world?
I hear this, and I understand it must be like this, but I must say that my experience in the last years with the third generation, the generation who are now about 30 years old, to get an education, who know the history of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, they are much more understandable about the murdering of the Jews and the takeaway of all their properties than the former generations, who still felt some own guilt either of their parents or themselves. The third generation is more free of this. I don't think that the anti-Semitism is there, but I don't think it's in any way leading not in the free world at least, is not leading a leading factor.
Well, for our viewers around the world, you did a great service to the memory of your parents and your sisters who were taken from this world way too young, stolen from us. Thank you for sharing their stories, and I hope it gives you some comfort to share the stories with us.
Thank you very much for having me.